it's I think this is a fabulous one for me. Why don't you stick with it? I think my all-time favorite topic, apart from games, in terms of what the subject is. Has anyone got any thoughts about what might be discussed during this? Why don't you? That'd be good then. Do you know what I think this is all about? Because I think this is much more about the bigger picture of driver training. So something along the lines of what happens after. I think this is all about post-test. I think this is about us as driving instructors. Can I ask you guys, before you were driving instructors, what did you do regarding speed limits and sticking to all of the rules on the road?
I actually stuck to the limit still.
I stuck to the speed limit. It was other things I did differently.
But out of fear, not out of, you know.
Oh, mine was anticipated regret.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, anticipated regret for me. That's why I was doing it. But I think sticking with it, and if you think about the thread we had number 38, which was why don't you motivate, and then why don't you empower, and then we're on why don't you stick with it. So it's all about, it's the same thing. So we're following the same thread, really trying to get something. So still nobody's got anything. I'm going to start off then. So I'll ask you guys, do you guys stick with the speed limit? Now,
Truth or honest answer?
Honest answer.
Honest answer, I tried to.
That's it, yeah. That's it. So you're trying to. Hello, dog.
Would you call me?
Well, you know it.
I find it harder later at night sticking to the speed limit.
Harder later at night, yeah. That's interesting.
On the motorway.
On a motorway, late at night, when it feels empty, feels safer.
80 miles an hour feels like 50 miles an hour.
There you go. I love honesty. I think there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean that one does it, Ian? It's a feeling. What did you do before, guys? Before you were training to be a driving instructor, what did you do differently?
I used to drive faster.
There you go.
I used to get away with it.
Next job.
You used to get away with it, yeah, but you had a certain job in a certain kind of emergency service. And to a certain extent, you can't get away with it. I've got you, Sammy. To a certain extent, you can't get away with it, depending on your emergency service. I've met people on blue lights that were attending speed awareness courses on blue lights when they were attending. So, Sammy.
Yes, well, before I did this job, I used to work in the care industry, and it was quite a long journey to work from my house. So I used to speed a lot because it was always rushing to get there, rushing here, rushing there, Russians everywhere. You know, so until that day I got my speeding ticket. Through the letterbox, and I was like, oh no. And it was a 33 and a 31, you know.
Yeah. And
since then, before I became a driving instructor, I've always watched my speed there in that particular road. No, everywhere. And so I put the speed cruise control on.
There you go. So there's a little story going on there. If anyone knows anything about behavioural change models, Sammy's just demonstrated quite effortlessly.
You saw what I did there?
A place where she was thinking about the theory of planned behaviour. Anyone who's done any kind of training about behavioural change will know it. So it is one little place where Sammy will stick with the speed limit. This isn't a whole thing about speed limits. I think that's just a really easy way to do it. If you think about new drivers and sticking with looking in the mirrors, that's a big concept I think we could explore. but it seems that only I could talk for the whole hour. I could talk for the whole hour so easily on this subject.
At least.
At least. There's someone who knows me and my, but it is so difficult, so difficult. But I don't even think we need to stay in driver training. Who's ever gone on a diet? Yeah, make
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, about 100,000 diets,
Yeah.
but they don't work because just like, you know,
So-
what you're doing is you're not treating the cause of the reason why you're overweight. You're just treating the symptoms by going on this diet and that diet.
There's all sorts of more reasons than that. All
Yes.
sorts of them.
And it's not
Absolutely.
looking at the cause. And it's
Yeah.
the same as going to the doctors and getting a tablet for something. It's treating the symptoms, not the cause.
There we go. Excellent. Thanks, Sammy. So we can explore the other bit. Keith, after Ian, because Ian did his hand up a second ago. Ian, go for it, please and thank you.
I can't remember why I had my hand up now. I think it was purely when we got, just going back to speed limits, we used to drive around quickly, getting job to job. And then they put trackers on the vans. So then we started driving slower because we used to rush around to get home early.
Right.
Then they started tracking our journeys and
There you go.
penalising.
So anyone who does know anything about behavioural change models, there's a perceived behavioural control going on in that moment. I know I shouldn't do this, guys. It's just, I am fascinated by the whole subject. Now, when people drive past the speed camera, they do things. When a new driver sits in a car with an examiner next to them, the perceived behavioural control is all consuming. They do everything they possibly can. What motivates them post-test to do anything with that same behaviour that they exhibited during the driving test? And this is where we need to get better as ADIs. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm saying I'm fascinated by the subject that I'm not good at. I need to know more about the subject so that I can sit in the car and do things, because often I'm sitting in the car with full license holders. Anyone else do fleet stuff? Terry, Sammy, you do. Neil, you do, don't you? Phil does. Fleet, and those of you that train PDIs, new driving instructors, it's the same principle, because there's a perceived behavioural control, which is them in the moment of their part 3 or part 2. And it's ouch, because it's how do we motivate ourselves and how do we motivate other people long term? So it's this motivation thing, but sticking with it. Brilliant. Keith.
Yeah, I've got a little story to tell going back to the speed limits. Took my little girl to Cheshunt Park a few years back, and it rained all day long, and we parked our car on the grass verges, and when we came out, everybody was sliding around. No one could get out. It took us 2 hours just to get out of the park. We then got onto the motorway, and the motorway was closed past the junction. I eventually got off the motorway, went round a few back streets, came back on the motorway, went to go. It said 50 miles a limit. I overtook some guy and I got flashed. What should have been an hour and a half from A to B took us 5 hours, and a flash and a letter saying you were speeding, doing 55 at a 50-mile limit. So that's my.
It does
story.
happen. It does
Yeah.
happen. And normally before that, Keith, would you say you would normally be someone who'd go over the speed limit?
My wife keeps telling me I do. Yeah. In a 30-mile limit, she'll say, it's 30, Keith. I said, I know. I'm only doing about 32. It's okay. There's a camera up there. It's okay. I'm only doing 30. But yeah, I think we all tend to go over that little bit, don't we? We push it that just a little bit longer. And Terry's looking and going, no.
Oh, is it too easy to speed nowadays?
Yeah.
Keith, Are you going by that 10% plus or minus thing?
Yeah,
It doesn't exist.
doesn't it?
No. It doesn't. I meet people on courses who are sitting there with a letter saying 31 in a 30.
Yeah.
So please be
Right.
careful. Cameras don't need to be discretionary. They have no feeling about who you are, who you were, and what you used to do for a living. But no, but this is the thing. So some people aren't aware of this. That's 10% plus or minus. Sorry, well, now I've started it and we've gone off on a speed thing, and now we're talking about speed all the time. Is that her saying something?
Yeah.
Mrs. Keith, we're looking after you.
Looking after us, it says.
Teresa, go for it. But Keith, just on that note, can you see how perceived behavioural control is, I believe I can get away with 32, 33 because I've got 10% plus or minus. You sometimes get a new information. Gotcha, Steph, but Teresa was first. Brilliant. Yeah. Teresa.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my mute button. Before we disappear off of the speed options, you were talking about reasons potentially why you might, or the only ticket I've ever got, I was describing to my other half because my anniversary came up on my Facebook the other day of my speed awareness course. It was pre-ADI, but actually it was down to my kids. And I remember sitting in the speed awareness course and they said, why are you here? And it's just like all these people were giving reasons why they got caught speeding. And my reason, which I accept wasn't a reason, I was on my way to a karate grading. We weren't late, but my kids were in the back of the car screaming their heads off at each other. And I came up to a set of traffic lights, didn't even spot the van in the cut-in. And I managed to get from 30 to 34 past the van, off a red light, and got caught because I was busy being emotional and screaming my head off at the kids and telling them I was going to bang the bloody heads together. And so I think that's one of the things I tend to use that example and try and put context there with my learners, because at the end of the day, if you put context into things, try and get them to relate to it as they might, then they're more likely to stick with it because they'll see a reason why. And I know maybe I shouldn't use this term, but I always say to them, like, if you think about it, if you treat everybody else like they're an idiot on the road, and you've got a responsibility to look after them as well as yourself, then you'll be absolutely fine because you'll be one step ahead of everybody. So, and then it allows them to put things into context. We have a lot of conversations on that higher level of, so why are they behaving like that? And what are you going to do about it? What should you do about it? And can you be empathetic? Would you get stroppy with them? If I wasn't here, think about yourself, post-test, you've got some really slow person in front of you and you're trying to get to a meeting. What could you do differently? Oh, start off a couple of, 10 minutes early. Right. We have a battle in our house. I'm always the one that leaves quarter of an hour early for a journey. My other half will leave he'll look it up on Google. It takes 57 minutes and we will leave with 7 minutes to spare. And it drives me absolutely potty. And then he speeds, and so I don't need to because I've prepared. So it's just context, I think. Get them to relate to a situation and then give them reasons why they would or wouldn't. And then you can have some really good conversations.
Absolutely. Brilliant. I mean, that could be what might get discussed next time on the why don't you? Because that's Terry's one. Terry said, why don't you waste my time? Sitting at the side of the road having those kind of conversations. Can you imagine that question? What do you think would be happening in your life that could make you go over the speed limit? What a brilliant question. And I can say it's a brilliant question because I heard someone else ask it. and it wasn't me. But asking a learner that, what could happen to you? And there's loads of things that you brought up there, Teresa. Now, I wanted to interrupt myself, but Steph put her hand up a little while ago. I'm going to try and remember what you were talking about. I might come back to you in a moment, Teresa, because it feels rude. Steph, what were you going to say? I love what you said, Teresa. Too much for me to answer them.
Well, I'm going to change the tact completely of, or track completely of, you know, why don't you stick with it, away from speed? For me, I don't stick with something because I don't enjoy it, so I don't stop doing it.
Oh, yeah, good one.
And I wonder, is that something our learners are the same with? They don't enjoy changing a gear, so they don't do it, or, you know, something like that. But certainly for me, I don't stick at something because I don't enjoy it.
Good point. There you go. That should start them off. Started Phil off. Well done, Steph. Go for it. I like that. Phil.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a question to ask, really. When people pass their driving test, they tend to drive in a certain way to pass their test. What do we think is acceptable for them to not stick with post-test, but still be safe drivers? Obviously, speed is something that we would expect people to stick with, but are there any things that they do for their driving test that we would actually say to them, well, yeah, that's acceptable to change that or to alter it? And it's a bit like Steph was saying, they might stop doing something because they don't enjoy doing it that particular way.
I know what you mean. This is better. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're bringing out the juicy stuff. Terry's going to answer you then, Phil, and I'll come back to you, Phil, see what you say, because you've obviously got a thought. Steph's got
Yeah, Phil. Right, my answer to you, Mr. Philip. I think it depends on whether your training is test focused or solution focused. I think if you're training someone to do this stuff, it's not bell ringing, it's I can't think of the word. What's the word?
Push pull.
Push pull, thank you. Because you think or you believe that that's what the examiners are looking for, you might say to them, once you've passed your test, you don't have to do that. So that's test focused training. And if you're teaching someone solution focused, taking the person into account, I don't think there's anything that they would do differently after, or that you'd say to them, yeah, it's fine to do it after, do that for your test, but forget about it after.
I have to agree with Terry. I heard myself saying so many times, and it honestly makes me wince when I used to say, you won't pass your test if you do that or don't do that, because I've just given them permission. I have given them permission. Go on, Terry.
And I used to say that as well. And I also used to say, don't worry about push pull after you pass your test. I don't do it that way. And I thought I was a good instructor. They all deserve a refund.
Yeah, I still know I'm rubbish. Thank you, Terry. And we're doing all the honesty thing. It does hurt me that. Teresa, go for it, please.
On that note, Phil and Terry, I tend to have discussions about different, if you're going to use steering as an example, different ways that people might steer and how they've been observed. You know, what do your parents do? What do you see other driver types doing? You know, what's the most efficient thing to do in that particular scenario? What's the effects of you sort of shuffling your hands in this situation, and, you know, sort of trying to get them to see the reality around something. And then they can make their own decisions based on that post-test. But one of the things I was going to say, developing from Phil's question, was, I don't know about what Keith would think about this, but I always think about a post-test scenario in the development of their driving, in terms of like, you see people cutting roundabouts and you sort of talk about why might somebody do that? Now we're talking about 2 o'clock in the morning, everywhere's empty. Is it okay to cut across the roundabout, or do you still have to follow around the crust? You know, an advanced driving sort of scenario where you're driving down a lane and you're sticking yourself in the correct place to be able to see further. You know, that's more of an advanced driving technique, which you might not suggest is a good idea during a test. There might be places where test routes around where we are, that I would say, right, you can see really clearly about half a mile down the road, stick yourself in the middle. But you wouldn't do that. You might discuss it, but you wouldn't encourage them to do it in a test scenario, because they're not going to, I don't think it would be looked on particularly well, because the driving examiner doesn't know how the driver can drive or how they've been coached. They only expect a safe level of driving in that situation. So I don't know, there's certain things I would say, don't do this, because although it's acceptable in certain circumstances, it might not be seen as particularly safe.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's all sorts of simple ways around it, isn't there? What could go wrong if you do that? And how do you make sure that when you do that, you're in control of what could go wrong? Phil's first, Terry, but I've seen you. There was something else, Teresa, with what you were saying. Because we tend to focus on new drivers here, and I need to remind everybody that I very rarely sit in the car with new drivers anymore. I'm all, you know, post-test, and people have had crashes, and who else? Fleet. So sitting in cars with people who drive all the time. And if I tell someone who's really making sure it's safe and straight lining a roundabout, I just say, tell me about that. You know, it's where we get people to investigate their own behaviors and their motivations, and when they would be tempted to do it differently, and when it might go wrong. That's when we are the best type of trainer, coach, whatever, in my opinion. Phil, then Terry.
Yeah, going back to what Terry said earlier, I think, yeah, it's absolutely right. It's whether you pupils being taught in a test focused way or a solution focus. The important thing is that the pupils that we develop their own safe style, their own safe techniques, their own safe way of thinking. Yes, we might have to have a conversation about maybe that wouldn't work on a driving test, but what you're doing is absolutely fine. So yeah, it's absolutely what Terry said. It's whether we're teaching solution focus or whether test focus, and we all know which we should be teaching. But it's letting that driver develop their own style. That's my sort of thoughts on it. And yeah, I think that's it for the moment.
Yeah. I'm asking everybody, but because Terry's coming next, I am, and because Terry spoke about the pull-push technique. Has anyone ever messed somebody up completely because they have insisted on push-pull? Insist on a technique for somebody who just can't do it. And what you do is you set them back weeks, I think. I think we do more damage sometimes. And just let someone, you know, just let them be. Do you crash? No, steer that way then. Thanks, Terry.
I'm ashamed to admit it, Fiona, but 2 years ago when I first started, I had a frisbee in the boot, and I used to give them that to practice with.
Yeah.
And send them home to go practice on a dinner plate. Oh my God, what a caveman.
It's
I'm
just
so ashamed.
It's just how uncoordinated we make people by saying don't steer how you naturally do it. It's the same thing as you must hold a pen that way. I have no idea which is my left and my right very often, because my teachers all kept telling me, you write with your right. I'm ambidextrous. I was swapping. So I had this left and right thing going on in my head that I have no idea. And people say, you're a driving instructor, you are supposed to know. That is when I learned left and right, because it's right hard to turn right. I'm not northern, but it's right hard to turn right. So I can do right as long as I'm driving. As long as I'm driving, I'm perfect. Weird. Loads of people had their hands up, and I wasn't sure if it was Neil or Teresa. Can I go for Neil first?
You can go for Teresa first if you want.
I'll go for Teresa first then. There you go. Teresa.
I still, Terry, sorry, I still tell certain people or suggest to certain people that they go home with a dinner plate. And I've got a steering wheel in my boot of my car, because there are certain people that, although I would not suppress somebody who could make a move safely with their own style, you get so many that basically just shuffle the wheel, such small turns. And there's no way they're going to get around a bend or a roundabout or into a car park space. And so they need to find a way. And sometimes that's something I will show them, or I will suggest that they observe other people or whatever, so they can see how they might turn the wheel, because what they're doing is inefficient and they're not actually making any moves. So in that respect, push pull or grabbing the steering wheel a bit higher, or, you know, one-handed even, is probably going to be better than what they're doing, which is like little minute sort of two degree movements. So yes, I still do it. I'm only sort of a baby, and it was suggested to me, but I'll use it as long as it's useful. But if somebody showed me that they could steer without that intervention, you don't fix what's not broken.
Yeah, I'm also, once again, thinking of next times. Why don't you waste my time? Neil, I'm talking too much.
Yeah, I've just had a thought. So how many people encourage people not to stick with it by saying, after they pass the test, you'll learn how to drive? Right. How many people do it? Loads.
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm also blushing. I might have had that same, but I've said it of myself. Wow, I only learned to drive after I passed my test. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Teresa, and I think Terry, were you first before Teresa? You don't want to say anything? That's because you're ashamed. Teresa, and then
in the old days, Fiona, I would have said that was exactly right, because we were instructor led. I've told many a client / PDI that I didn't learn to drive until after my test, because I was told, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then I found out how to do it afterwards. You know, what was, so yeah, in our day, when we passed our tests, we were so instructor led, then that's not surprising. And then the students that you get now, or clients you get now, their grandparents and their parents are saying, oh, you won't learn to drive until afterwards. But actually what we're trying to do as coaching and client centered is trying to get them to have that mindset already, so that they're learning to develop their style, and they're learning to develop that anticipation and all the planning, and become thinking drivers. So that is outdated. It's an outdated thought, because hopefully by post-test they will be developing, they'll have already be all the way to developing their style and knowing how to be safe and knowing how to plan and knowing how to anticipate. So knowing how to think and deal with solutions. So I think that, yeah, in the old days when we were students, yeah, definitely. But now it's outdated.
Yeah, nice. It is true. If anyone's interested, I've got something to say, but no one's interested. Terry, go first. And then someone else.
No, Fiona, go first. I'll go after you.
No, it's starting a new topic. What were you going to say? What were you going to say?
No, you go first. I've got 2 points.
Right. I was just thinking about, because Sammy brought it up earlier, and I thought we're going bigger picture. So we're going outside of driver training. Who's ever started going to the gym and then has now got rid of their gym membership? Who's ever gone on that eating plan and now just is even bigger than, oh, that was me. So why aren't we sticking with it? Why is it hard to stick with it? Terry,
I've got 3 points now.
there you go. Come on, Pointy.
Right. First of all, in answer to you, Fiona, I think the biggest thing, whenever we take something new on, whether it be New Year's or whatever, whenever there's a plan in place, you have to make space for it. You have to make space in your head. So you need to move things out your head that aren't important anymore. So you're not spending time thinking about those things, and you need to make space in your life. If you make space for things, new things, whether it's a new business, it's a new hobby, you have to make space for it. If there's no space for it, it won't fit anywhere. It doesn't fit anywhere. You won't stick with it. So that's my answer to that one. Second one, going back to Steph, I think, I think she's right, because if we try and insist on a certain method because it's best for the test and the students don't enjoy it, Steph's absolutely right. They'll stop doing it after test. So yeah, that's why the whole everybody's an individual and should be treated as such with their own individual ways of doing certain things. If they're safe to do it, just let them do it. If they enjoy it that way, they're much more likely to do that after you're gone. Not dead. I mean, not like post-test.
Yeah.
My third point actually is going what's up here? My third point is it's going to go away from your point now, Fiona. Don't matter?
It's fine.
Sure?
Yes.
I'm going to play devil's for a minute. My opinion is they pay me to teach them to pass a test. Discuss. I'm done now. Bye.
That's a really good one. Sticking with it. I don't stick with any diet because it tells me I'm not supposed to eat cake. It's not happening. I can monitor my portion sizes or choose when I eat.
That's why you've got to make space in your head.
Space for my cake. I've made plenty of space for my cake.
Change relationship with cake.
Yes.
Yeah, don't see it as naughty.
No.
No.
Call it carrot cake. Call it one of my 5 a day. Actually, it's supposed to be 10 a day.
Exactly.
There we go. No, but Steph's got it. So you're talking about making space, Terry. Just going back to that. Do people, when they learn to drive, make space for learning to drive? I hate it when he's right. So people make space for learning to drive. What is it that we need to stick with? Some people need to stick with stuff and they say, oh, I need to get out of this. I need to get out of this job. I need to do something else. I need to get into speed awareness, or I need to get into fleet training. And exactly like Terry says, do we stick with it? Do we make space? If there's no space, we can't stick with any of it. Like Terry said, discuss. Go, Sammy.
Well, it's that word that you said about 3 or 4 times just then. I need to do this, I need to do that. What about what you want to do rather than what you need to do? So for me, if I can refer it to something that I've experienced a lot in my life, is diets, but it can be relatable to anything. You've really got to have a goal, and that goal has to be something that you are able to visualize, to be there in that moment and say, yes, this is me. And then it has to line up with everything else in your life. So you have to be ready, not just, oh yeah, here's the book, yeah, I can do this diet. You have to be ready and to be able to visualize what's happening after you've done this. So what's motivating you to do it? Because motivation is massive in anything that you do. So if you tend to lose focus doing something, whether it be diet, whether it be learning something new, whatever it is, for me, the only way that I can motivate myself is to know that it's my purpose to do that. It's on my path. It's where I want to be. you know, and it's in line with my values as well. So I'm measuring everything I do by my values, by my purpose, and then the passion to want to do it motivates me to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
and it's because
yeah,
it's a personal thing, it's easy to manifest it. So our job
yeah,
is then draw that out of
to
whoever.
draw that out of the student. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I always think, what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to, and to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And I find out so much by just asking those two questions. What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? And the visualizing thing is massive.
Absolutely.
Steph put her
I was going to say something in relation to Steph, where people want to do something or like it, and what Terry said. Terry said a couple of things. When you think of the sticking with it, when you hear someone say for New Year's resolution, I'm going to give up smoking. What kind of motivation or what kind of thought is it? I'm going to give up smoking. Does that sound like a benefit or something you're giving up? I'm going to stop smoking is a different thing. Now we're going into NLP, aren't we? I'm going to stop smoking is a really different thing. That's just stopping something. That's different. Giving up something up. Got you, Terry. So it's that when you're going to stick with something, you've got to think about it in linguistically in the right terms, I think, the words you use, and think about exactly what you want from it. Because if you're going to give up something, that's harder than if you just change your habit and do something new. Also, I don't know if any of you know, I know Neil does, there's with any kind of intervention like the indoors courses, speed awareness or driving, safe and considerate driving, on those kind of things, you do an action plan at the end. Why would you need an action plan? And the good thing about the action plans they do now is they do, what do you want? What do you want to get? What do you want to be? How are you going to do it? And when is it going to go wrong? And then when it goes wrong, how do you get it back? And then what if it goes wrong again? What's your backup plan? That's brilliant. Absolutely superb. It really digs into people. It's a supreme process, and I hope I'm not doing anything wrong by talking about it. But the action planning part is what Sammy was talking about. But it's Steph, it's finding that joy of something. So isn't it changing the language? So if it's something like they really hate reversing around a corner because I don't see the point of it, and you say, what's the safest way to get on your driveway so you can get out easily in the morning? Reverse on. That's reversing around the corner. Oh, changed it. You're changing the concept. Oh, I'm talking again too much. See, I'm talking so much. I've bored Phil, so he's fallen off his chair. He's currently asleep, and he had a cocoa and everything.
Fiona,
yeah.
If they don't stick with that action plan, you know what happens. They turn back up at the course, don't they?
yeah. That would be a very sarky thing to say. And if your plan doesn't work, I've got my diary here. Do you want to book ahead for 3 years' time? I wouldn't say that because that'd be cheeky, really cheeky. Phil, I'm sorry I bored you so much. Steph.
Yeah, I think there's two things you can add in. You know, Sammy's talking quite about emotions there, and there's two emotions that can stop people sticking with something. It's too hard for them, or they've got a fear of it. An example being, I've got a lot who hate hill starts. They're afraid of hill starts because they've had a really bad experience of rolling back. Or I've had a couple who were afraid to set the gas to find that biting point because they've had a incident where the car zoomed off because they haven't understood about how to control it. So, you know, emotions, I think, can play a big part in sticking with anything. And fear, hatred, you know, as Sammy said, a need rather than a want. You know, it's a fine line, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I got distracted by reading. I think you're quite right. I think any emotion, Steph, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Absolutely any emotion. I am far more likely to speed when I'm listening to a good tune and I'm happy. I do recognise it, mostly because my speed limiter kicks in and the car goes, Terry.
I want some more of your speed limiter impression. I'll just go back to what you said, Fiona, about the language and how important it is. And just like you said about, what was your example?
I've been talking
The
to
NLP.
Oh, stop smoking and give up smoking.
There you go. Yeah. So another one, and I think it's really this is quite a powerful way to look at it, is you're not going to go on a diet. You're going to choose to eat more healthily.
Yeah. Not having
language.
Taking
the language is so
away.
important.
Yeah. In the choose
Language is so important.
And more healthily doesn't mean I can't eat cake. Oh,
Exactly.
Sorry, you're not talking to me. I'm sorry.
No, I am talking to you. Exactly, Fiona. If I say go on a diet, you're going to think, oh, I can't eat cake.
Yeah.
If I say eat more healthily, you're going to say, oh, I can eat more, I can eat cake, but not so much.
There you go. And it's much more relaxing.
Yeah.
It is not triggering fear response.
Exactly.
And comfort eating. Thanks, Terry. I feel much better now.
You're welcome. The invoice is in the post.
But can you see when it goes wrong? People who stop smoking, when do they have another cigarette? Has anyone stopped smoking? What's the trigger point? And if you get someone who is thinking of stopping smoking and you sit down with them and you're writing a plan of what they intend to do, I don't want to smoke anymore. It's not, I don't like it. It stinks up the house, but whatever it is for them. What do you think your trigger point will be where it's just too tempting and you put one in your mouth? And I know this because I've had a conversation with someone and they said, when I'm at the pub. Apparently, pubs used to be open places where you could go and have a cigarette. And that's how long ago the conversation was. I know I will find it hard in the pub socially because all my mates smoke. Interesting, isn't it? So people do know what's gonna. So when you say to somebody who's new to driving, what do you think your trigger points will be that make you do the behavior that at the moment you don't think you ever will? I will never drink and drive. What a ridiculous thing to say. If I say to full-grown adults with kids, you have had 2.5 glasses of wine. I don't know units. You've had some glasses of wine and you're sitting at home and your 16-year-old daughter just phones you up and she has just had a row with her boyfriend in the country and she is walking home because they've split up and she is never talking to him again. She's walking home in the middle of, it's dark. She's walking home. How tempted would people be to go pick her up? I've only had a couple. I won't get caught. The motivation to go and look after your daughter. Ouch. Glad I haven't got kids. I'd be terrible, wouldn't I? Excellent. Terry, go.
I'm going to jump on the back of your one, Fiona. Because I go a little bit step further. I go more gruesome than that. So on the courses that you know that I do, without mentioning any names, I say to them, hands up with drink and drive. And they're ADIs or PDIs. No one puts their hand up. I said, I'll give £100. Who would have 2 glasses of wine or 3 bottles of beer and drive? No one puts £1,000. No, £10,000. No one puts their hand up. £100,000 to drive 2 miles with 2 glasses of wine and your 3 bottles of beer, and £100,000 maybe 1 or 2 put their hand up. I said, so none of you will drink and drive. No, it's wrong. Wrong, I tell you. So I give them the scenario. Teenage, or pick someone they love. They're at a party, barbecue. The person they've picked out that they love walks through a patio door, because I think it's open. cuts the artery, blood everywhere, it's pouring out. They've had 2 glasses of wine or 3 bottles of beer. Ambulance is going to be an hour. No cabs are available. No one else at the party can drive. Do you drive them 2 miles to hospital? 98% of people change their mind.
Yeah.
And it's the motivation. It's the
gap.
It's the gap, Fiona.
It took me this long to say it. Look, 5 minutes to go, guys. It took me this long to say it's the behavioural intentional gap, and I couldn't help it. So it is the gap. And it's difficult. I totally agree. It is absolutely painful, and there is a point at which people do things that they wouldn't normally do, and it's exactly what Terry said. Keith.
Yeah, just going on what Terry was saying about the drink, etc. I used to work in the Guildford Crown Court, so I used to see the outcomes of a lot of these people sitting in the place where the judges turn around and say, right, drinking, driving, you've now lost your license, you've now lost your job, you've probably lost your home, you've probably lost your wife, and you lost a lot more things. And it really hit home to me at that point, and also to the people, I think, also in the actual Crown Court itself.
So it's that positive, negative,
yeah,
and it's the carrot or the stick that we spoke about in the motivation. Why don't you?
Yeah.
It's all about what is the strongest one, and for some people, it's the stick. For some people, it's the carrot, and it depends how you think about things. Because my motivation not to speed, I don't know where Terry's come from, but my motivation not to go over the speed limit has nothing to do with being a driving instructor. It came from my previous career, which was nursing, and just feeding one person with a spoon. I would love to have a conversation with that young man, paralyzed from the neck down, and say, do you know what? You made a big difference to me forever. Because he is still, if he's alive still, he's still being fed by a spoon. So it's like, do I think that is a negative thing, or was it anticipated regret? Is that negative or is that positive? Because it feels to me to have been a positive thing now when I look back. And I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to admit this, but there was a place where I noticed that I was getting peer pressure, and the motivation was different when I was in a different country and I was driving someone else's car. Very bizarre. And I had to really slap myself around the face. Like, why is it different because you're in a different country? What the? So my feelings were changed by, so there was my gap. My behavior has just been rock solid since 18 and a half. And my gap came when I went to America. It's just bizarre. And it's noticing it. And if we can, as driver trainers, get people to notice where their gap is, they then have informed choices. And that's what we all want, isn't it? Informed choices. And it's about having that ability to choose. Do I want to use a stick? Can I deal with the consequences? Rather than bartering, just looking at the worst case scenario. I do agree with what you're saying, Keith. Anyone got any more thoughts on this? Sticking with it, diet. Don't call it a diet. Thanks, Terry. I promise I'll wear a t-shirt. I promise to eat more healthily. Now give me cake. I can have that on the back. Has no one else got anything to say? I could still go on for another hour. Easy. It's a fascinating subject to me, because I don't think this is something that we're ever trained to do in driver training, is help people find their own gaps. Where will your gap be? What will be the thing that you're going to find hardest not to do? Will it be speed? Will it be mirrors? Will it be drinking and driving? Will it be, what is going to be the hardest thing for you post-test? with what Phil said ages ago. See, I've got things from everybody. What Teresa said, Steph said, it's everybody. Right, Neil, good luck with this recapping bit.
Yeah, some big shoes to fill, aren't they?
I know, I know.
To take this. So I think from what we've gained from all this is we all agreed in the long run that speed before becoming a driving instructor was okay, and we used to push the limits a little bit, and what stopped us from doing that was a little bit of fear of getting caught. Sammy talked about a behavioural change which indicated that she'd stopped speeding. We've talked about perceivable behavioural control as well, and Steph brought in the fact that if people don't enjoy it, they're not going to stick with things. We talked about test focused and solution focused as well, and whether they'll stick with it through that. There was a lot of honesty in the room as well to start with. And yeah, so it all comes down to things like Terry was talking about space. If you don't make space for it, it's not going to happen because you're not going to stick with it. And then a lot of things come out of emotions, motivation, determination, the language that we say things in, or the language we tell ourselves that we're going to do it in as well. And then you mentioned trigger points, and then you mentioned the behavioural gap, and we've all got to find that gap. And at some point, we will find that gap individually.
We've got to fill it.
Yeah. So there you go.
Brilliant. I think it's well done, Neil. For a first go round, that's hard, as well as participate. I really don't know how Kev did it. I really don't. What I really liked was the potential of this one. It's one of those things because it's not spoken about. We as ADIs are not trained to do that. It's not part of the standards check, really, I don't think. So even our governing body are struggling with how do we help our ADIs develop their skills in those kind of things post-test. And that's why the coaching came in so long ago, and it's taken a long time for our standards check to change from the check test and all the rest of it. But this is the principle. This is why we have got new things to do as driving instructors, because we've got to stop them hurting themselves post-test. New drivers, 1 in 5 post-test are going to have a serious crash, and we all want to do something about that. And telling them doesn't work. Where's your gap, guys? How do you avoid your own crash? I'm going to do a plug. I don't usually. Mike Spooner's show. Is anyone going? The driving instructor show online. Have you played with it yet? Go on it and play with it. You can walk around. It's like some 1970s computer game. It's fabulous. I'll be there in the afternoon. When am I? No, I might be there in the morning. I can't remember. I'll be there for a portion of the day because I'm working afterwards, but I'll be there as my little avatar. I'm blonde, wearing a blue dress. You wouldn't look when you choose your avatar. All of you will work out why I've chosen to be blonde with a blue dress. It is bizarre. Anyway, Mike Spooner's driving instructor show. It's Monday, and it's ticket based. It looks like fun. I'm going to try and put a video up of me when I'm not there, so you can all go and laugh at it. But there you go. So anyone else? Phil's going. Kevin, Tracy are going to be there. Lisa. Neil, I think you're there. Anyway, if you're going, that's the plug. I will put, or we will put in the, we'll post it everywhere. The next Why Don't You is number 41. Why don't you waste my time? And it's whatever you want to bring to that. I know what Terry meant because he told me. But other than that, I have no idea what he was talking about. All on Terry next time then. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, people in the attendees who didn't come in. But thank you very much. Please, anyone else out there on FaceAche, please just come in, be a panelist, join in, say something, because we need some new people. And I'm really glad we do have some new faces, because it does make a difference. Thank you very much. I'm going to end the Facebook Live, I think. See you next time. Take care. See ya.